Evening and welcome to Michael Coren Live on CTS. Now, just last week we heard of another case of a man who was a Jehovah's Witness who thought blood transfusion was the wrong thing. It was wrong. It was against the law of God, and whatever the case, couldn't go through with it. Another case. There have been many of these, some involving children. That's when it becomes particularly difficult. A family of Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're not unique in having this vision, but it tends to be Jehovah's Witnesses. Say our child cannot have a blood transfusion, cannot have this type of surgery. And of course there is then a great debate between the right of the individual with a particular religious view and the right of the state to protect those who demand our protection, children. It goes on and it goes on. The popular view of Jehovah's Witnesses tends to be harmless but ridiculous. And I don't say that to be in any way insulting, but I think that is the popular view. They're the people who knock on the door when you're in the shower or just sitting down with a beer and a hamburger to watch the football, both American and British. And you open the door and say, no, thank you, when you're in a particularly good mood. But they're not really harmful, they're not malicious in any way, they're just a bit of a bother. Who cares? Well, perhaps. But others say, no, this is a cult, like any other cult, and that by its nature is a bad thing. We're doing a show tonight on Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, you won't see this done very often, because generally people don't really want to get involved too much. We tried to get people from the organization, Jehovah's Witnesses, on the show. Here are the people we contacted. We contacted chapters in Milton, Hamilton, Georgetown, many in Toronto. The national headquarters in Georgetown, the Canadian headquarters, quoted this: "Our policy is not to discuss religion unless the truth is being portrayed." Found that a little judgmental in that the show hadn't taken place yet, and I regard myself as a relatively honest man. Our policy is not to discuss religion unless the truth is being portrayed. This seems like a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? We won't come on because you're going to lie. Then come on to debate us. No, because you'll lie. We go ahead anyway. This show will not be stopped by people who want to impose that form of censorship. Jehovah's Witnesses. A cult? Harmful? Or just a group of fairly cranky people? Or people who have the truth? People who really do know what is right? 416-203-0202-905-332-3131. On my left, a married couple who were Jehovah's Witnesses, David and Vivian Aspinall. Welcome to you both. Thank you. And they come as a pair, you see, it's cheap that way. And on my right is Tony Costa from the Christian ministry Apologia. I got it right. I've put it apologia so many times. Apologia.
You got it.
Absolutely. Let's begin with David Aspinall, former Jehovah's Witness. How did you become a Jehovah's Witness in the first place?
Well, in the 60s, I was a very, shall we say, a determined hippie type. I wanted the answers to life's many questions, and just at the right time, a friend of the family said, well, you know, have you ever looked at the Bible? And I knew she was a Jehovah's Witness. I'd never really seriously entertained their beliefs before, but I kind of admired her because she seemed to really stand for her faith. I've watched her in action in a group in our home many times, and I'd seen that she seemed to be able to defend herself against all comers. And I had some grudging admiration, but I didn't know why she believed what she believed. And she promptly set me up with what they call a Bible study a week later, and there was no holding me back after that. I came to the conclusion within about 2 or 3 months that indeed they did have the truth. I'd read all their books back to the 50s. And I could see that at least internally their worldview seemed to be consistent. What I didn't realize, of course, is that having no theological background or training, I didn't see the faults. I did not see the fallacies in their reasoning. I wasn't trained to.
If I admired someone who was a Jehovah's Witness, I would admire the person, but I don't think I would be. There is so much, if you like, dark propaganda about them, and they seem such a, and again, I don't mean this with disrespect, but a fatuous group, you know, knocking on your door and looking fairly similar and selling, what is it, the Watchtower. I wouldn't be attracted to them. There was a need in you?
Well, I think like many young people, I was 20 years old at the time, and I saw that the world seemed to be coming apart. Assassinations and riots in the streets, cities burning down, the war in Asia. They were just at my door. I think the chief reason they got my attention is because they actually said to me, there is an answer to life's problems, and we'll show it to you if you'll give us the time. And I was willing to give them the next 6 months.
Now, I don't want to talk about the theological errors. That isn't the mandate of the show, and anyone calling in that the same would apply. It's the ideas of being a cult. You became involved, you found out they were wrong, you left. What's wrong with that story?
I think they would like to see those who do find out there's something wrong with it just disappear.
What do you mean by that?
Not that they would ever do anything like some so-called cults do to render their opponents physically. They would probably just like every opponent, every person who finds out of the fallacies of the historical cover-ups that the Watchtower's unfortunately guilty of, to just disappear into the woodwork, and many do. Most witnesses who leave do end up basically fulfilling that prophecy too.
What do you mean by that, disappearing into the woodwork?
Well, I think that what inevitably happens with most witnesses is because the Watchtower does such a magnificent job of poisoning every other religion on earth, slander by unfortunately dumping upon them. There's never a word of praise said about other religions in the official Watchtower publications. Because of that, when people do leave, they don't usually exercise the option of going and seeking another religion or going to a church. Usually what they do is go out and party or wallow maybe in their misery, not knowing where to turn next for some years. Most of our friends that left around the time we did, that's the kind of thing that would happen to them. We decided, unfortunately for the Watchtower, that we were going to take up this work and spend the rest of our lives dedicated to the task of educating.
But you joined voluntarily and you left voluntarily. So again, people have a right to be idiots, they have a right to be wrong. Well, I don't see the problem if you joined as a volunteer and left as a volunteer. Does that make it a cult?
They don't really let you leave with no strings attached. They don't let you just walk away. They have to make sure that they can cut you off from the people that are in the group, so you no longer have contact with your friends in there. They make it very effective. By disfellowshipping you, they more or less close your mouth off. They want to make sure that you cannot expose what you find out to the other people.
What does disfellowship mean in Jehovah's
It means
Witness?
that you're shunned by everyone who is a Jehovah's Witness, including family members, if you have family members that are witnesses.
Your family were Jehovah's Witnesses?
All my family, my personal family, are witnesses.
Is that how you became a
Yeah,
member?
I was raised in a witness family.
So how do your parents are still alive?
Yeah.
How do they regard
I
you?
know.
You mean there's no
They don't
contact?
contact me at all.
Nothing?
No, nothing.
Have you tried to contact them?
A number of occasions. When we first left, I wrote letters and postcards, and eventually those all came back. The letters were coming back unopened, and it's hard to keep that going when you get no response and you don't know what's going on, what's happening in their life, and whether or not they're reading what you're sending to them. I would send gifts, and they were eventually returned as well from all the different family members. And the only time I see them is generally when they have their conventions. They've had them at the Sky Dome, and they're having one in Hamilton. And my husband and me and a few other people go down, and we hold up signs with gospel messages and exposing some of the things that we feel they should have the right to know.
How do you feel when you see your parents walking there?
That's very difficult. It's usually pretty shattering. The whole experience is pretty shattering for me, but I feel I want them to know I'm still alive, still with my husband, still happy. And I don't want them to get away with just sort of pretending I don't exist. All of the witnesses. I want them to see that there is life after the Watchtower, that there are people out there that care about them, that pray for them, that love them, in spite of the fact that they won't talk to me. I would love them to talk with me.
If I'd been cut off from my parents and I saw them walking past me, I think I would probably run to them, hold them, maybe even beg them. Is there physical contact?
Well, the times that I've seen my mother and father, they were in a car. My mother covered her face when she saw me. So that's hard to take when you see kind of a look of disgust on your parents' face.
The lady that I mentioned set me up as a Jehovah's Witness. I saw her in a traffic jam at the Sky Dome holding several signs in front of me, and she just glared at me, not an ounce of sympathy in her face.
Even when I've been on buses and seen people that were particularly close to me in the witnesses, they just look straight through you like you don't exist. You smile, you say hi, and you get no response at all.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one brother and two sisters.
They're Jehovah's Witnesses too?
Yeah, and 9 nieces and nephews, 3 of whom I've never met because they've been born since we left the witnesses.
No contact with any of your siblings?
No, it's been, I've written, like when we initially left, I wrote, and I've had other people try and contact them so as not to put them in a... The other problem is they are in jeopardy if they talk to me from the Watchtower.
What do you mean in jeopardy?
The Watchtower tells them that they should not have contact with the person who's left the witnesses. If they're disfellowshipped, you're not supposed to talk to them.
What would happen to them if they did contact you?
They would be under threat of disfellowshipping themselves if they continued contact with a person who's disfellowshipped.
Now, the Watchtower, I know the magazine that when they come to your door and so on, but is it anything more than that?
Well, I think you could, the organization itself is sometimes termed the Watchtower because its official name is the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society.
Right, I see. When you're in the Jehovah's Witnesses, are you not allowed to contact other people? Are you allowed to have friends outside of the organization, outside of the faith?
You can have friends outside the Watchtower, but I would say it's discouraged. So I grew up as a witness, and I did have some school chums, but you kind of stick out because you don't do what other people do, and you tend to just maybe have one or two people that you would maybe get close to. Right. And depending on how strict you are or how strict your parents are, some of them would not have any would discourage completely any contact with other children or other people in the community.
I'll get to Tony Costa after the break to talk about the aspects of the cult, but I'm intrigued by this. We hear about things like love bombing and sleep deprivation and all that sort of thing. I mean, does that go on within Jehovah's Witnesses? Are there any techniques used like that?
Well, they keep you very busy because they have lots of meetings, 5 meetings a week, and then you go out in door-to-door work.
Do you have to do that?
You have to do door-to-door work if you're going to call yourself a Jehovah's Witness. It would, I mean, not all of them do the same amount of work, but they would talk to you if you weren't doing witnessing work. They would encourage you to keep doing that because that's one of their distinctives. It's what they consider makes them a Jehovah's Witness.
Right. It's also their badge. They feel God will chiefly approve them by when they pass through Armageddon. Since they're the only group that will pass through Armageddon, and they'll pass through it principally because they've been faithful in this one particular area.
Okay, lines are open for you. 416-203-0302-905-332-3131. Is this a cult? Or is it simply a group of people who should be tolerated even though they're a little bit odd? Michael Coren Live, back in a moment. The state and the church coming together, the views of some people when it comes to religious beliefs, no blood transfusions, no this, no that, sometimes no medical intervention, clashing with the views of the state that certainly the young have to be protected. And I would agree with that. Jehovah's Witnesses, most people think of them really as being, I suppose, harmless, if a little odd. Why bother? Others say, no, this is a cult, you know. They might not have the same reputation as the Moon is and people like this, but it is a cult. Are you bothered by them? Do you think that, hey, let them do what they want to do? Were you a member? Are you a member now? If you are a member, why is it that all of your representatives said they would not come on the show? And we had the central office, the national headquarters in Georgetown, saying, our policy is not to discuss religion unless the truth is being portrayed. That seems rather a judgmental comment on a show that hadn't even been put together at that time. Anyway, Tony Costa from Apologia, a Christian ministry that deals with cults and cultish activity.
Would classify as a cult. And the number one sign, Michael, which I think Dave and Vivian will concur with, is that it is control. It is the method of disfellowshipment that we just heard about is the means by which the organization keeps people within the group and uses basically the same threat of getting rid of them. So it's this tight-fisted control. That's really what it is. It's a form of mind use.
But you join, I mean, you can be brought up in it, then of course it's not voluntary, but David, for example, he voluntarily joined. If at that point you want to leave and they say, well, you've left, we're a very tight-knit community, we're not going to talk to you anymore, it doesn't seem to be the worst thing they could do.
No, well, in most cases, believe it or not, Jehovah's Witnesses that are disfellowshipped usually are not even granted a fair hearing. And I know Dave's case. I've read his case, and he was not granted a fair hearing. They basically usually indict those who are disfellowshipped of committing some horrible, heinous, immoral sin, and that is why they left the organization. But make no doubt about it, if you leave the organization, which is considered God's only organization on the earth, you've basically given up on God. You've given up on life.
But exclusive truth surely is, there are many organizations that believe that. It can be very difficult in Orthodox Jewish circles if you intermarry, if you leave that particular part of Judaism. I believe in the exclusive truth of Christianity. Now, it doesn't mean I then put down others, but exclusive truth, absolute truth, is surely not a terrible thing to believe.
I think that in the Christian context, I think the churches have been guilty, of course, I think in the case of the Roman Catholic Church in its history, there have been times when it has claimed to be the only recipient of truth. Mm-hmm. I think that in Christianity, I think that the exclusive truth revolves around an individual, namely Jesus Christ. Right. But what the Jehovah's Witnesses do is they make the organization the cornerstone. If you leave this organization, it is essentially the equivalent of leaving God.
I see.
And make no mistake about it, in their publications they make it very clear that the organization stands on the same par as God himself.
Okay. I'm going to get to the calls because Anne and Rebecca and Brenda and Melanie and another Anne in a moment. Just a few things I do want to discuss. A heinous moral sin. Were you accused of one, and if so, what was it?
The ultimate sin. From the standpoint of the Watchtower, the ultimate sin is to doubt or challenge God's organization.
So I thought it was going to be something really juicy. No, that's just that.
No, I think
that is worse. I mean, I think to some degree my family might still have contact with me if I had been guilty of adultery or become a drunk or something. Mm-hmm. Then I think they might have more sympathy for me because they would think, well, she believes that the Watchtower is the truth, that this is God's organization, but she has a problem.
Right.
But when I say, I don't believe that this is the organization that God is using, mm-hmm. and he's not using one organization exclusively, that is the worst crime you could commit.
Well, you referred to historical cover-ups or cover-ups of historical incidents. What did you mean by that?
Well, this is the principal element in both of our leaving, and if you do the research into other leaders of counter-cult organizations that specialize in the Watchtower, you find out that's what they have in common. They could put up with certain inconsistencies of doctrine or even personal things that may have caused some doubt to arise in them, but when they found out that the Watchtower was capable of covering up the facts of its own early history, or whitewashing history on a scale that Orwell painted in 1984, at Animal Farm. For instance, it's acknowledged in the Watchtower publications today that they've made certain historical prophetic blunders. For instance, that they predicted some things that didn't actually happen in the year 1914 and again in 1975. But what's not admitted is the scale of the blunders.
What did they say would happen in 1914?
They said in their early publications that 1914 would be the end of the Battle of Armageddon, not the beginning of the end of the battle. Right. They have now painted the picture, completely retouched it to make it that they predicted that the beginning of the end would be 1914, which looks like a pretty good prediction when you think about the history of the 20th century. But it's total distortion of what Russell, the founder of the Watchtower, actually taught. Therefore, it's very disconcerting when you, a loyal Jehovah's Witness, is told to teach the truth and to speak the truth at all times and to even confess your sin openly to the elders when you make a blunder. When you find out the organization that's telling you this is covering up the worst parts of its history.
They got the year wrong. I mean, whether we take them that seriously or not, but look, the Roman Catholic Church had in many ways a bloody history. Now it's coming to terms with it now, but for many years it didn't whitewash it as much as just wouldn't really deal with it. Again, countries have ignored their history. Britain, the United States, all have histories often to be ashamed of. They tend to whitewash or leave aside. Is that such a terrible thing?
It's a human tendency, there's no doubt about it. But when this organization, in case of the Watchtower, still today, as Tony pointed out, it's not the Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church, since Vatican II, has acknowledged that there may be light outside the Roman Catholic Church itself. But the Watchtower still holds to this basic teaching that unless you join it and give your full allegiance to it and get only your light from this organization, and therefore reject all other religious teachings of other groups, if you are not willing to do that, then you can never become a Jehovah's Witness. And if you start tainting your religious beliefs by contact with other religions after you become a witness, you could be disfellowshipped for that. So they want exclusive control of the light you're getting.
What about the 1975 problem? What happened there?
75, again, we lived through that period. Both Vivian and I were witnesses during that period, and I wasn't severely bothered by it by myself, but I know dozens of people who left the Watchtower because they were disillusioned about one prophetic blunder. But those same people who left didn't know, like I didn't know, what had happened before.
What was meant to happen in 75?
Well, again, they said that 6,000 years of human history was over and it was the appropriate time for God to act. In other words, for Armageddon to come.
So the end of the world in 1975.
And Jehovah's Witnesses sold their homes, put off mental, physical treatment, dental treatment, and did all kinds of things that showed that they had full faith that the Watchtower was correct. Unfortunately, nothing happened. And those people,
depending on how you look at it.
those people just had to live with it. And basically, if they criticized the organization, they were then told that, well, you shouldn't have really put so much faith in this date.
So they said the world is going to end in 1975, and it didn't. Why would they be so foolish that they give a particular date? Isn't that really asking for trouble?
Again, it's the history. They've set 11 dates for God to intervene. This was the last one, but now they've set another one. At least in 1989, they still had another one. They've kind of dropped that in the last few years, too.
Which was it to be?
The end of the century. The end of the...
Oh, that's an easy one. Everyone's saying that. I mean, big deal. You know?
There's no distinction in that.
They will make these blunders, and then they will turn around and more or less say they haven't done it. I mean, you may get some calls where people will say, we never said 1975.
Right, well,
because I was told that. Oh, no, we never said 1975. Now, I was very young when... 75, I was 15. But when I went and started researching the history of the Watchtower and reading the publications from the 60s, they had charts that ended with 1975. They had subtitles that said, what can we expect for the mid-70s?
So what's their motive to do it? Is it just to control a group of people, or are they will-meaning people who are wrong?
Well, their whole history of growth has been generated by this date-setting habit of theirs. And so you'll see during the periods of their greatest spurts of growth, they've had a date in front of them. Now they're, in North America at least, kind of on a plateau. In the rest of the world, they're growing like crazy, however, because this historical pattern is not yet filtered into other languages.
Before we go to another break, this blood transfusion thing, what is all that about?
Again, it's a distinctive of the Watchtower. They've only held it since about 1945. The founders of the Watchtower didn't know anything about it, and as we were talking about in the green room, the church fathers knew nothing about it. Nobody knew anything about it.
What do they actually say?
They say that the book of Acts and the book of Genesis agree that no one is to take blood into their systems. And of course, in the ancient times, that was a prohibition that had to do with religious observance in the Roman Empire, for instance. But in their case, they think it applies to blood transfusion and any other use of blood that is not approved by the book of Leviticus.
No blood transfusion for any witness?
Yes, under pain of disfellowshipping.
Even if you will die if you can't have one?
Yes.
Because they'll say you have to be loyal to God.
Have people died?
Above this.
Thousands.
Thousands have died?
Yes.
You know that for certain?
Sure. They even boast about it in the publications.
They boast about people dying?
They think it's a test of loyalty.
Have children died?
Oh, yes.
You can back that up, that children have died?
Absolutely.
Okay.
May I interject? Also organ transplant.
Not yet. Organ transplant?
There was also a prohibition at one time with organ transplant.
Not any longer.
Even cornea transplant.
Yeah,
So you can have organs, but you can't have blood?
That's right.
Can you have organ transplant without a blood
It's
transfusion?
up to your conscience now.
Can you have much surgery without blood transfusion?
Well,
And surely you
I
lose
think-
blood
I think-
during any sort of surgery.
Yeah, but now they do have substitutes. I mean, maybe the witnesses have been a guinea pig in some ways and introduced a lot of substitutes.
Right. Claim here that Jehovah's Witnesses, not only thousands have died because they won't have blood transfusion, but the magazine Witnesses will boast of this. They say children have died, thousands. 416-203-0302. We asked you to come on. We begged you. 905-332-3131. Michael Coren Live. Back in a moment. Straight to those lines, they are busy. Anne is on line 5. Hello there, Anne.
Hi, good evening.
It devolves upon Jehovah's Witnesses to faithfully teach these truths door to door. They believe that's the apostolic method, and there's some verification in the book of Acts that at least the apostles did similar work in their home territory, but there's no proof at all that any Christians in the early centuries went door to door religiously, certainly not lay people.
Where does the money come from? Before we get to the second question, which is a great one, where does the money come from to maintain all this?
Because they've so poisoned the attitude of witnesses towards other religions, even charities, that they will not give to, for instance, organizations like CARE or World Vision or anything that's tainted by so-called Christianity. because they believe all religions out there are in the devil's pale, not at all supported by God. So therefore, the only option left finally is for a Jehovah's Witness to give, if he has means, to the Watchtower.
I see.
And they have an instant audience of all the people who are Jehovah's Witnesses for their literature. As the witnesses pay for their literature, they give a contribution towards their literature. And then when they receive contributions from the door, from people, they give that to the Watchtower too.
We should add that they publish about 1 billion publications a year, more than all of the Protestant denominations combined.
1 billion?
1 billion, and they charge for them. They say it's on a voluntary basis, but effectively the person taking it door to door pays for it already. And then the contribution that you may give to them as a contribution goes to the Watchtower too.
How many members are we talking about worldwide? Do we know?
It's about 6 million active people doing the door-to-door work, plus about 6 million more who are family members and go to the Kingdom Hall and on a census might call themselves Jehovah's Witnesses.
And in this country?
It's about 100,000 active members, and again, double in terms of practical membership.
The question that was asked, man, it's a very good one. I assume a goodness on the part of people, and they may be wrong, but they have that right. A child needs a blood transfusion, will die, they would stand by and let that child die. Are you really saying they would stand by and see their child die?
They wouldn't do it painlessly, but they would if they were loyal Jehovah's Witnesses. Watch the child die.
They love their children like anyone else loves their children, but they think it's a test of their loyalty to God. Mm-hmm. Now, if the Watchtower changed its mind tomorrow and said blood transfusions are okay, not that they'll do that, I'm sure a lot of witnesses would just go right ahead. So to me, that kind of puts the question of who is your loyalty to? Is it to God, or is it to the Watchtower organization? Because they're calling the shots.
Have there been legal or police interventions in these cases?
Many times, which only increases their sense of martyrdom, so that they take that as a persecution, and therefore it fulfills their self-image, which is they're the only people of God who dare to stand up for these principles.
Have witnesses gone to prison because they've let a child die?
I believe so. I haven't gotten personal knowledge of that kind of thing, but they've been arrested for sure.
Yes.
And the judges have intervened many times in these cases, and that too is viewed as persecution by the state.
And thank you for that call. Let's go to Rebecca on line 1. Hello there, Rebecca.
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
I'm not, my only experience with Jehovah's Witnesses has been when they come to the door. Both my mother and my grandparents welcome them to talk and leave their literature if they'd like. My mother's a Christian, and my grandfather was raised Roman Catholic. And no one in my family has ever been involved with any sort of worship with the witnesses or not. But whenever I read their literature, when sitting around the kitchen table sort of thing, it didn't strike me as that much different from other religions such as Judaism or Christianity. The message that they were giving to me, I don't know about the inner workings of the church. The part about not giving the blood transfusions, I mean, that's really harsh. My younger brother was in a car accident when he was 10, and he wouldn't have lived without his blood transfusions. But isn't that just a part of what they believe? I mean, if it is that they believe that is God's message as opposed to the organization's message, how is that different from other religions?
Okay, fair question.
I think the main difference between the message of the witnesses and the messages of Christians, say, is the Christians point you to the person of Christ as your Savior, whereas the witnesses, their message is more about a paradise earth. They believe that the whole world is going to become a paradise, and you can be a part of it if you're loyal to the organization. It's a different message completely.
Of course, but it's organizational devotion. But again, surely they are, you're not forced to be a member. And as a child, obviously you grew up in that family, but you chose to be a member. And it seems to me, outside of the blood transfusion, and there I can see there is a real problem. If you choose to be part of this, and your friends are all part of the organization, and then when you leave, your friends are told not to go near you, I certainly don't approve of that activity, but if they want to...
I think the main danger, though, is that they control the information that you're getting. So if you become interested in the witnesses and they are educating you, and you are most likely have very little biblical knowledge before you get involved with them, then you're just going to buy what they say, trust them.
But so what?
But what happens is they're not just stealing, if you think in terms of eternal future, they're stealing your life now, because what they're going to ask of you, what they're going to ask of you is for a life commitment.
Yeah.
You have no idea
no.
at the time. If you
say no.
Okay, sure, you could say no, but if you say yes, you don't know at that time that what this might cost you is a daughter, a child, a parent, a grandparent. You have no concept that what this might mean is it's going to destroy your family.
Okay, good point.
I was not raised a witness, but I converted several of my friends who were in the rock and roll bands that I was in before I joined, which is another thing. By the way, I gave up a music career, which I'm not bitter about. But on the other hand, some of the friends who gave up their music careers and had bright futures, much brighter than mine, to join the Watchtower are still in it. I'm out. We were all captured by fraudulent means. They are guilty, as Vivian just hinted at, not just promising an eternal benefit, which they never deliver, because Armageddon's been on the horizon now for 120 years, according to their chronologies, but they also steal your present life. They make you put off education or get rid of it completely, like in the case of those musicians, gave up their careers in music. They make you give up needed medical treatment other than blood transfusions, like the issue that Tony brought up before, the organ transplants. Multiple thousands again died in the 70s while that prohibition was on. Now they've lifted it. They didn't apologize publicly in their publications for what they did to those people or their families. They never say, we're sorry. They just say, God's given us more light. We've changed our mind, but that's the way it is. God reveals more light as time goes on.
We'll go break here. Sorry, 416-203-0302. Well, the numbers are up, and actually the lines are very busy. We'll get to you all, Brenda, Melanie, Anne, George, Joan, when we come back. A lot of women calling in as well. Straight to those lines. We're talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses. We have two people here who were Jehovah's Witnesses. They are no longer. Tony Costa, who works monitoring and dealing with cults and cultish activity. And to reiterate and re-emphasize, we made phone calls. You would not believe how many phone calls we made. Bless you, Caroline, because she was making a lot of them, and Mike too, to try and get someone from the Jehovah's Witnesses on. It's good for us. We like the other side too. We spoke to people in Milton, Hamilton, Georgetown, loads in Toronto. All, no, we won't come on. The Canadian headquarters in Georgetown of the Jehovah's Witnesses said our policy is not to discuss religion unless the truth is being portrayed. Well, your version of the truth cannot be portrayed if you won't come on. Brenda is on line 3. Hello there, Brenda.
Yes, Michael. I've listened to your show different times, and I've always wanted to call in. Jehovah's Witness to me is a cult. I've been harassed by them. I've had to go to the lengths of calling in the cops to have them removed off my place.
Really?
And no,
tell me more, Brenda. What were they doing then?
They were trying to push the way in. I had just gotten home from work, and they tried to push the way in. And to them, I was at that time going to the Salvation Army. I was in a cult as far as they were concerned.
They tried physically to push their way into your house?
Yeah.
Who were involved, and one of them was my grandparents. They raised me as a child, and so up until the age of 8, I was involved in the Jehovah's Witness, going to the Kingdom Hall and their Bible studies, or whatever they call them. I also have a cousin who married a Jehovah's Witness, and she herself is a Bible-believing...
Do you have any contact with these people who are Jehovah's Witnesses?
Pardon me?
Do you have any contact with these people?
Yes, I do. Oh, contact with the Jehovah's Witness people?
Yeah.
No. They actually, my grandmother got sick. Actually, when I was 8 years old, she got severely sick.
All right, man, I appreciate the call. Let's go to Anne on line 2. Hi there, Anne.
Hi, how are you doing, Mike?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good, great topic you have on tonight.
Interesting.
2 quick questions. One, when one is ostracized or disfellowed, as the term may be, can one return at a later date? Why they'd want to is irrelevant, but can they return? And the second question is, I have seen the literature, and I don't find it any different to any of the other Christian literatures. So what are some of the warning signs that one would look out for?
Very good questions. Can you rejoin?
Yes, you can go back. Most people who leave end up feeling somewhat guilty because they leave for immoral reasons usually. If they are kicked out, it's usually for the typical reasons that may generate the kind of comment we just heard, namely that they seem like other Christian groups. Well, in morality, they are, with the exception of the blood issue. But in terms of their doctrinal stand, in terms of their view of the authority of the Watchtower, the central teaching group, they are definitely cultic. And they're not alone in that, but they're particularly strict in this regard because the Armageddon stick is a mighty weapon. And they've wielded it now for all these generations. 4 generations really have died already in the Watchtower, believing that Armageddon was going to come in their lifetime. So they don't even expect to get old, Jehovah's Witnesses.
But David, you're a highly intelligent man. I'm not such a fool myself. If a group of people told me in 1983 the world is going to end, I would say, oh, give me a break, you know? You cannot predict that. Why wouldn't you say, well, okay, there are parts of it that appeal to me, but I'm going to move on? I mean, are we talking about people generally who aren't very worldly, people who aren't very bright?
As Vivian said before, we're talking about people who don't have much historical background or theological background.
What about common sense?
Very few Baptists or Pentecostals or people who are really Bible-oriented ever join the Watchtower.
What about common sense? I mean, forget someone has no religion at all. You're not going to buy that the world's going to end in 5 years.
People are attracted to, though, the morality of the witnesses, the order of their life. You know, they're going to look at them and they're going to think, wow, you know, that looks so nice, the family all together. You know, I think those are the kinds of things. And the people are nice. They're friendly. Yeah. They're hardworking. If you have someone employed that's a witness, they're generally hard-working, honest people.
Oh, when you had the convention at, was it the CN Tower? Sorry, at the Sky Dome. That wasn't long ago, was it? A couple of years ago or something?
Yeah, every year they have a big one.
Well, I remember because my wife said to me, I cannot, it's like, she's very strange. I just went downtown, it's just full of very smartly dressed people. And it was Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, the very first thing they did when I became a prospective member back in 1970, when I still had my sandals and long hair, the first thing they did was invite me to a convention at the racetrack out in 27. Yeah. And the first thing I noticed was how well behaved and perfectly orderly this occasion was. Yeah. And if you want to know what the appeal of the witnesses is, just go to one of their conventions and you'll see a well-organized, beautiful image of what the world might be like. But the hook is always, you've got to join Jehovah's Witnesses and submit yourself entirely to the teaching of the Watchtower. Yeah. They have that control over people so that they don't even scatter garbage on their convention grounds because they're immaculate, but the cost is so immense.
And I think because the people that a lot of times get involved are not biblically literate, when they present to them this idea that the world is going to become a paradise and you can be a part of it, and then they select their text, mostly from the Old Testament, to make their point, and they string them all together, if you're not biblically literate, it can be very convincing. So read the surrounding verses. That would be my caution.
I don't know, though. You know, I tell you, the people I was raised with, and biblically, they've never even seen a Bible, but they wouldn't fall for this. They wouldn't fall for this. You know, I think there has to be something else about you.
But again, what they have in common, as that young lady just pointed out, with other Christian groups, is we all believe, if we are Christians, that at some point Christ will return. The hook with the Watchtower is we know exactly when. And they can make a case for it if you're biblically literate. And they certainly did in my case. I didn't have protection from my church background to be able to know the fallacies in their arguments.
Biblical gymnastics.
My mother always kept one room in the house. It was called the lounge. It was just the front room of a very small house. Immaculate. Everything else, it was all over the place. But one room was... Why, Mum? Just in case. It wasn't anything religious. It was, I don't know, maybe the Prime Minister dropped in or the Queen. It didn't happen. But let's go to George on line 7. She wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. Hi, George. You're on Michael Coren Live.
Hi. Hi, everybody. I would like to say that those people, they are a cult. And they approach you with planting the seed of doubt in your faith. That's the first step they start with. Okay. And as long as you are with them, they drag you to the depths of their belief until you drown completely, which is mean you will be cut off from your regular people, your regular friends. Right. And I would like to say also, and I witnessed that on the national TV in the 80s and 79, a girl, she fell in love with a guy out of Jehovah's Witnesses and being cut off completely from her father and her mother and her friends, and she been out in the street for almost 2 months. And by the Salvation Army, she been helped out.
Second, I just want to stop you there, George, because I want to bring Tony in, because he hasn't said much. He's got to sing for his supper here. But I thank you for the call. I thought, now the lines are very busy, but I thought the lines would be full, not of people saying, yeah, they're not so great, but of Jehovah's Witnesses defending themselves. Are they allowed to? Are they supposed to?
Well, Jehovah's Witnesses usually in the public eye, particularly with the media, they always play a low key. As you can see, these results do not surprise me at all. I've come across them before. They're very wary of the public eye. They believe they alone have the truth, and they believe that any other method, a platform like this, would be conceived by a Jehovah's Witness as simply a diabolical attack on them. Mm-hmm. And so they have the truth, they alone have the truth, and it's not debatable. And that's basically the stand they take. It's the we, they, it's God versus Satan. It's God's organization versus Babylon the Great.
So this show wouldn't even be discussed or considered or watched by them?
Jehovah's Witnesses are not known for public debates. The last ones they had, their two founders, Charles Russell and J.F. Rutherford, to which I read the transcripts. I don't think they fared so well. After those two debates, they just completely cut off public debates. Or any exposure to the public whatsoever. Because again, in the Jehovah's Witness mind, the public, the government, the whole political arena is satanically controlled.
Right. So that means they won't be suing us either?
I hope not. They do have powerful lawyers, though.
They have not been litigious so far.
Yeah, that's why they will not salute the flag. They will not go to war. It's we, they.
All right, Michael Coren Live, CDS, but we have good lawyers too. Back in just a few moments from now to more discussion on Jehovah's Witnesses. I had no idea about all this, did you? See you in a moment.
Sometimes an opportunity comes along to meet a person who could have a profound effect upon your life. Since 1985, Alan Walker of Financial Concept in Burlington has helped over 1,000 families create simple yet effective financial plans.
A good financial plan should create peace of mind. Will you trust me to help eliminate any worries that you might have about the future?
Come into the light. Call the number on your screen today.
Hi, I'm Michael Coren. Average savings of $2,000. What? Yeah. Leasing a new car from Auto Depot. You've heard about them already. It's probably the only car company you have heard about. Why? Because they're so good. What does that mean? It means they're cheap, they're honest, the people are terrific, the service is wonderful. 416-444-2444 on the net, autodepot.ca. Look, this is important. Not for me, for you. Auto Depot. 416-444-2444. The company is, remember, Auto Depot. Who is that man on those commercials? Very attractive. We're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses, and let's go to Joan on line 8. Hi there, Joan.
Hello.
Hello, Joan.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I want to tell you, I'm going to make it very short. I am a Jehovah's Witness. I have had numerous of operations, and I have had no blood transfusion. I am 78, and I'm still kicking.
Evidently.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say?
That's all I want to tell you people.
Okay. Well, thank you for the call. How do we respond to that?
Well, can I just say that, what about all the others that are not kicking anymore? The little children, the little babies, and all those that needed blood transfusion.
You still with us, Joan?
Yes, I am.
What about those, I didn't mean that literally, what about the allegation that thousands of people have died because they haven't been allowed to have blood transfusion?
How come? Because they have stood their ground, they believe in their faith.
And they're dead.
And they're died, and they'll have a resurrection.
What about if that person is 5 years old?
All the same with that person. I know children that have their parents have refused blood transfusion, and they've died, but they will have a resurrection, and sometimes you're better off.
Yeah, but if you want to say that, perhaps you have the right. But do you think a 5-year-old child should be allowed to die because their parents have a particular religious view?
That's up to their parents.
If the parent wants to beat that child senseless, should that be allowed?
What?
If the parent wants to beat a 5-year-old child senseless, should that be allowed?
No, it shouldn't.
Why not? You said it was up to the parent.
It's cruel.
Isn't it cruel to let a 5-year-old child die?
No. It depends upon what the child had when she was when she's sick.
Maybe you want to say something.
Well,
without words, so that's a miracle.
I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I took that stand when I was a Jehovah's Witness. I thought it was wrong. Now I see it a little differently because I think witnesses are...
Whom you worship.
That follows one particular man or the teachings of one particular man. Now,
Hold on a minute. Is that true? Is that how you do, surely that's is that a definition of a cult, Tony?
Not necessarily. There's a broad definition of a cult. There's sociological, there's theological definitions, but it doesn't have to be the following of a man. It could be an organization, as in the case of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Right. And the word cult can be defined in various ways.
Exclusive claims.
Yeah, very exclusive.
Go on, Patrick, because the thing is, you can follow the teachings of one man and perhaps not be a cult, and you can be a cult and have other criteria. But go on, Patrick.
Right. But in my experience with the Jehovah's Witnesses, I've found that they have more kind of touch with the outside world than do some of my so-called Christian counterparts that I know of who have separate music. Some don't own TV, some don't drink at all, whereas the witnesses engage in these activities in moderation. And when you think that the exposure they get with other people of various denominations and faiths, and the opportunity they have to interact with these people and find out about their teachings, and with people who've had experiences with ex-witnesses and whatnot. I mean, not everybody tells us to get lost.
Are you a Jehovah's Witness?
Yes, I do associate with the Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, are you a Jehovah's Witness?
Yes, I am a Jehovah's Witness.
Why did you use euphemism, and why did you hide that fact and then say, I'm associated with? Why didn't you just say, I'm a Jehovah's Witness?
Why didn't I just say I'm a Jehovah's Witness?
Yeah.
That's the way that's the proper term, is fellowshipping with the Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, Patrick, look, please, man, I mean, to be honest with you, if you would have told the screener that, we would have put you on immediately. That's how we put Joan on straight away. Why did you say you're associated? Why didn't you say you're a Jehovah's Witness?
Why? Just because I wanted the chance to be able to talk to you and to the audience directly and not have any intervention from the Aspinalls.
Believe me, sir, I wouldn't have let them. That's why we had Jonah. I wanted to hear from you. Now, the point you make about some Christians with their own music, Christian plumbing and all that sort of... I agree with you. It's annoying and it's not cultish. It's just stupid and it's a subculture. But let me ask you about the question of blood transfusion, because Joan was quite explicit. Do you think that a child should be allowed to die rather than have a blood transfusion?
The reason why so many have died is not so much from the... refusal of the blood transfusion in itself, but it's the lack of cooperation from the medical community up until very recently. I mean, you'll get so many medical experts that say that the use of blood, that the reliance